Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Michael's Record Collection, where we talk about great music with the people who make it and the people who love it. I am your host, Michael Citro, and I am joined by Frost founder Jem Godfrey. Jem, thanks for your time.
Nice to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Progressive rock band Frost coming out with a new album, Life in the Wires, October 18th on Inside Music, the fifth studio album. Jem, I can't wait to dive into this record with you, your first double concept album. But I want to start where I normally start with my guests by asking, what was your first favorite record, Jem?
Oh, that's a great question. My first favorite record would have been, I think it was called um, Messages, I think by OMD or Secret Messages. It was a very early one, about 1981. Very closely followed about 2 hours later by Just Can't Get Enough by Depeche Mode, funnily enough. Because I was a synth pop boy initially. That was where I came from. So yeah, the prog rock thing happened a bit later on.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, and it also kind of explains a lot about your particular brand of progressive rock as well, when you go back that far. Um, I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about it, your musical background in terms of, did you come from a musical family? Are you the first person that kind of started picking up instruments and putzing around with them? Or, tell me a little bit about that part of your life.
I don't think, in terms of my family, my parents weren't musical. Although I did have a singing aunt, but I don't know whether that counts. But yeah, no, it was actually a lot of it was down to the influence of my older brother Simon, who was 6 years older than me, and so basically he sort of bullied me into into listening to the music he liked, and also I think at the same time I kind of, because of the synth pop thing that I was sort of into, I was quite taken with the idea of playing keyboards really. So I tentatively asked for a few lessons from my parents, and did the usual thing of doing about 3 months and hating them. And then after that I sort of taught myself. So it was kind of, yeah, Simon also played the drums at the time as well. So I think I was the convenient keyboard player that could be drafted into his band. So I think that's how I started pretty much in a couple of succession of fairly shonky blues bands.
Tell me about the progression into the band Free Fall.
Well, again, that was Simon. I mean, it started out as, I think he had a band with a couple of friends of his from college, and they were sort of quite like Thin Lizzy at the time. It was like a couple of guitars and a bass and drums, so there wasn't really a space for me. And then I think it got to the point where I'd started to learn sort of lots of interesting keyboard solos and stuff like In the Cage by Tony, Genesis, Tony Banks' solo from In the Cage.
Sure.
And I remember learning that one summer holidays, my kind of that was my summer project. So by the time I could play that, suddenly I think I was quite a lot more interesting to the older musicians. So I don't like to use the word whiz kid, but I was kind of the 13, 14-year-old precocious little brat who could play a bit. And so I was just kind of I got drafted into that band, and that band eventually morphed into Freefall.
Hmm. Now, obviously, you're pretty well known for your production work. Tell me what drew you into that side of the recording industry. What was it about production, and how did you sort of get started with that?
I think it's like many careers that start. It all sort of started a bit by accident, really, because obviously I had these highfalutin ideas. I was going to be an artist, and a pop star and all that kind of thing, and that didn't happen because obviously it doesn't to 99% of the population. So what I did is I ended up working. I got a job at a radio station in the UK. When I was about 22 years old, I was unemployed. I was on my uppers a bit, and I thought, right, well, I'm going to have to do something. So I got a job at um, Virgin Radio, which was a London-based AM station, and it was kind of related because they had sort of 8-track tape machines, and I was making the promos and all the kind of commercials and the on-air sound stuff.
Mhm.
So in my head, that was kind of like production. So I learnt, weirdly, actually, I learnt my sort of trade through making commercials for radio stations, which was actually a brilliant way to learn, because you've got to be very concise, and you've got to make it, especially on AM radio, you've got to make it really clear. So yeah, there was just a few tricks and tips about how to produce audio. And from there, I ended up going to Radio One, which is a big BBC station in the UK, big pop station. And because that station was sort of the biggest station there was, um, and it's quite a close knit team there. So basically, what a couple of the DJs, or one of the DJs in particular, knew I could produce a bit, and he knew I could play. So he sort of said, I've got a friend who's making, I think he was making instrumental saxophone albums. And he said, "Do you want to do that?" And I went, "No, not really." So we kind of, and then I think eventually we got sort of introduced to each other, and we sort of decided to start a sort of production songwriting partnership, which actually ended up going very well. So it was I sort of I learnt on the job really, but as I say, my chops were really taught in radio stations.
So when you're producing an artist like an Atomic Kitten, a Holly Valance, how much interaction and back and forth do you have with the artist, or is it different each time out?
It is different each time out. I mean, I think obviously bear in mind this is 20 years ago and things are quite
Right.
different. But back in the day, it was some of them could write, which was great. Some of them couldn't or didn't want to or weren't particularly interested in doing that. And so we did a variety of different roles. Sometimes we were just mixing something else or producing something else that somebody else had written, or other times we were writing it as the duo, my production partner and I, from the ground up. Other times the artist would come in. It varied really. It sort of whatever was required.
How interesting is it for you when you hear something that you've produced on the radio, it becomes a hit?
It's very strange because it's because you sort of the songs. It's always the songs that tend to be the ones that you didn't really not work too hard on, but it's there's songs that you really craft and you think about and you really go over the lyrics and you're really proud of it. Generally, they're the ones that end up sitting on a shelf somewhere. I mean, I've got about 75 songs sitting at Universal in London that I'll never get my hands back on. But it's sort of interesting. There was one time when the Atomic Kitten song was number one, walking down the street in the town where I lived at the time, and this guy in an open top car drove past, and it was playing on his radio, and it does make you kind of go, that's bizarre. But I don't know. I mean, it's a lovely feeling. Obviously, it's a lovely feeling. But I don't know. There's always that slight. I've always had a slight imposter syndrome about it, really. So it's kind of I always in the back of my mind, really stupidly, really, I had this idea that well, it can't last, it won't go very well, and so it's sort of I suppose it's faintly embarrassing because it's the British way, isn't it, of not going, oh, we're brilliant, aren't we brilliant? So it was a bit like it was on the radio and I felt like going, sorry. Classic Brit, classic Brit.
Yeah, didn't mean to do that.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about your playing, because you actually got to play keyboards for the likes of Joe Satriani and Steve Vai. How did that happen, and what was that like for you?
That was brilliant. I mean, it came about very randomly via Dave Gregory of XTC, whom I've never met. But basically, I'd played something. It was the band Big Big Train, who are obviously doing very well these days. They'd done an album, and I'd played some keyboards on it for them. And I think Dave was still in the band at the time. And obviously, Dave knows everybody. Dave knows Mike Keneally, and he knows all those sort of fabulous ex Zappa players and that world. Anyway, so I think Keneally had just said to him, we need a keyboard player because I can't do these gigs. I'm playing with Vi at Vi Fest, whatever. I think that I'm not sure that goes on anymore. And he said, so we got some shows in England. Do you know any keyboard players? And totally randomly, of all the keyboard players Dave could have picked, he picked me. So I got an email going, "Hi, this is Mick Brigden. Do you fancy coming on tour?" No, actually, I think it might have been Mike. Actually, I think it was Mike Keneally emailed me, which was weird in itself, and said, "Do you want to dep these shows?" And of course, I said yes, and then I put the phone down and went, "How the hell am I going to do that?" So it's one of those brilliant moments of. I always have this motto of say yes and worry about how you do it later. So it was an extraordinary. The first tour we did was when I think it was Joe's Black Holes and Swans. I can't remember what the album was called, but that album. And basically, they just said, come out for us for a week and then do the 5 shows after that. So I basically ghosted Mike for a week, playing Hammersmith Odeon and all these kind of places. And the thing about Mike is because he's such an absolute unbelievable genius, he plays the guitar, he plays the piano, and actually a lot of the times he plays the piano and the guitar at the same time, which is really annoying. But he basically he had a really rudimentary keyboard setup of just like an electric piano, a Fender Rhodes, and a synth just that did a bit of strings. And of course, I'm used to programming all my synths and making it all brilliant. And of course, Mike being Mike, he's literally just winging all this music on the night. So I had 5 days to basically learn all this music on a completely different keyboard rig. And it was absolutely terrifying. It was terrifying, but I just about managed to do it. And as a result of that, I then got offered the G3 tour the following year, which
Nice.
again was amazing because Steve Vai is obviously a huge, huge hero of mine. And to actually, and I never in a million billion, when I was growing up in London, and all my mates were listening to Vai and going, "Oh, this is brilliant." Never in a million years did I think I'd end up being his keyboard player, which was extremely strange. And he obviously he's another one of the sort of Zappa proteges, and he has a reputation for being quite intimidating, and sort of he'll single you out on stage if you make a mistake and stuff like that. And I was thinking, now I'm sure it'd be fine, and he is exactly like that. So it was brilliant. I mean, it was for me the most brilliant way of upping my chops, and really making me pull my finger out and work really hard. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I've got to say, it was one of the greatest sort of experiences of my life as a musician. And Satch, of course, is lovely. He's absolutely lovely. I love Satch to bits.
Well, I'm glad you got that experience. That sounds amazing for you. And eventually, of course, you decide you want to pursue your love of progressive rock and you form the band Frost. And just tell me about when did you start thinking about Frost as a concept? Maybe you didn't even have a name in mind, but when did you start to think, really, I've had some success. I want to maybe do something that's fun for me, and you wanted to go down this progressive rock rabbit hole.
Well, that's exactly what it was. I was right in the middle of the pop thing actually, and we were kind of I think we were 4 number 1s in by this point. It was all starting to gather momentum, and it was all and it's always the way of I think anything is the more successful you are, the more people want to interfere. Which is the experience I certainly had in doing pop music, and it was basically gets to the point where the A&R guys were just saying, right, don't do that, change this, do that, take those chords out, lose that, move this. And you end up just thinking, well, this is, what am I doing? I'm basically, I'm basically, I liken it to working in a bakery. You're basically just banging out loaves of bread, that aren't really what you want to do. So in the end, I came home, a couple of nights, and I'd just be sitting on the piano, and I just think, well, you know what, I'm going to play something in 7/8 because I can, and I'm going to play something in 9/8, and I'm going to listen to all this because I'd grown up obviously listening to Genesis and lots of prog rock bands. So I just basically kind of came home in speech marks, as it were, to a sort of more of a comfort blanket musically.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote the first thing I wrote was the track Hyperventilate, which is on Million Town, the first album, just as a piano piece. Basically, it was literally just a sort of an extended piano piece. And then I finished that, and I thought, oh, it would be brilliant if I could put like a band around this, have drums on it and have, do it like properly. So over the course of a few months, I just sort of built it up, not thinking about it would ever be released or anything. I was just doing it as a fun project. And so I put it together as a demo, and I played it to a couple of friends of mine. They went, "You really have to do this. You've really got to do this as an album." And I was like, "Okay, all right, fair enough. Excuse me." And so yeah, over the course of about a year, I think I wrote Million Town and sang it and put it together. It was always happening in the background while I was doing the sort of pop stuff. And then by the time I'd finished the album, I contacted John Mitchell, lovely John Mitchell, who played guitar on it and sang. And he heard the finished thing, and he said, "You've got to send this to Thomas Farber at Inside Out." So I went, "Oh, all right then, fair enough." And then we got signed, and then suddenly this thing that was this kind of bizarre little side project was a band signed out of Germany. And so that was it. Sort of happened. It did happen very organically and without any kind of plan really. And it was originally called Radio Frost. It wasn't called Frost. It was only right at the end that I changed the name to Frost. So again, the radio references, it's all there really.
Yeah. You mentioned John Mitchell. I've had John on the show to talk about his Lonely Robot project. Had you known John? How was he the first call for you?
Well, John, this is a sort of a story we both joke about now. He at the point at that time he was daft enough to have his email address on his website. So I went, all right. So I'm gonna email him. Hi, you don't know me. I'm some bloke. Do you want to play some guitar? For a bag of cash? And he went, yeah, fine. And that was how we met. Really, it was really strange. But yeah, we endured as a partnership, and we're now great mates. In fact, I was just talking to him only this morning. He's on tour with David Cross in America at the moment. I was just chatting to him.
Yeah, with John and with your band when I first heard you guys, because I was familiar with John's work already, and your voice and his voice do share a lot of similarities. So I wasn't even sure who was singing on the first Frost album some of the time.
Well, John, he did. We did a thing that he sang the first verse of Black Light Machine. I don't quite know why he did that, but anyway, that was a sort of his first. That was his first introduction, and I suppose I kind of mimicked him a bit to start with. I wasn't very confident with my voice at all then. It was the first thing I'd ever sung, so I was all over the place really. And so he was a good template. I thought I'll do John. What would John sing here? What would John do here? So I kind of was like I stunt John basically because he just done his Kino album, which I loved.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
I was just basically trying to be John Mitchell. I always have been. Spent the rest of my life trying to be John Mitchell.
Trying to be John Mitchell. So
Oh,
you guys put out this Million Town album, fantastic
there it is.
record, and sort of progressive rock, obviously, and even now, but then as well was a little bit of a sort of a niche crowd, and it wasn't like a worldwide phenomenon, but in the progressive rock world, I feel like Million Town did very very well and really established you guys. But then Jem, you got busy, and then
Yeah.
Frost was kind of on again, off again for a while. What was that like? I'm sure you didn't necessarily want to shelve it, or maybe you did think this was a one off.
Well, I kind of, yeah, if I could have my time again, I would sit myself down and say, calm down a bit. It's all right. Because it was at one point, which I kind of still would have loved to have done. But I did have the original idea that we do the album. This is before it was signed. We finished the album off, print it up on 1,000 CDs, just like, blank CDs, put them into blank sleeves, go to a bunch of prog gigs and just leave them around. So, with no branding. So eventually someone would go, oh, I'll take it home and listen to it. And hopefully they go, oh my God, what's this? This is unbelievable. And there'd be no information. I kind of hoped the idea was it would be like a stunt prog band. Like just if I hadn't been quite so ego driven, I think it would have been brilliant to have just never owned up to it. And to people have gone, who was this? What was this? Well, who was this? And I kind of part of me still wishes I'd done that because I think it would have been so funny,
Kind of
to
like a
have,
pop up restaurant kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, exactly right, a pop-up prog record. So that would have been fun. But yeah, I think if I'd had my time again, I think it would have been better to have not done I'm going to split the band up. It's all finished. It's all done, because that was just, I couldn't see a way of finding the time to do a second Frost album.
Yeah.
But what I should just have said is I haven't got time at the moment, but we'll be back rather than doing that. Well, that's it. We're all done. It's all finished. So that was a mistake. And then yeah, sort of 8 years of I think it was 8 years of trying to build a couple of businesses up because the pop stuff all kind of fell apart. And then yeah, raising kids and building businesses, and it was just just wasn't time. Just wasn't time. And then suddenly I'll do a new one. God, it's been 8 years. Oops. So yeah, so therefore everyone's been very patient and very sort of forgiving of my behavior.
Yeah, I remember when the announcement came out that Frost is we can't continue with Frost, just too busy, too much going on, and it was like, but you gave us this, and then now you're going away. How is that? That's not fair. And then you come back and you work with other people that I had already admired. Deck Burke from Darwin's Radio and had
Yeah.
some success a little bit with his own solo stuff, and you got him involved. And I'm like, you have John Mitchell in the band, you're singing, and now you're bringing in Deck Burke. This is almost an embarrassment of riches at this point.
Well, I mean, this is ironically the kind of I think the thing I should have made more about at the time is it was Experiments in Mass Appeal was a bit of a concept album in itself. The title it was like, how much can we pour into something to make it popular? And it was like Experiments in Mass Appeal. It was the whole of, how do we cross this band over? How do we do it? So it was we did these videos at the time as well called Frost Reports, which were the kind of these they've gone into fairly sort of folklore status in the Frost fan base, which is lovely. But again, it was all part of the concept of, we're doing promo videos and we got this and we're doing that, and it was this sort of thing of, you know I suppose Stephen Wilson did a kind of thing of it with the Future Bites a couple of years back,
Mm.
about the thing product, it's product, here is your product,
Yeah,
that kind of thing. And it was a little bit of a sort of attempt at that, really, but I don't think I explained it well enough because no one ever no one ever understood. So there we go. But that was one of the reasons why the sound was quite different. It was designed to be product.
gotcha. All right. Well, you're back with Life in the Wires. Like I said, October 18th on Inside Out Music. The lineup is yourself, John Mitchell on guitars. You brought back Nathan King on bass, Craig Blundell on drums, which I don't know how he has time for this with as much touring as he does with Steve Hackett, but you managed to secure him for that. Um, he had originally departed after the Falling Satellites album and the Others EP, but he's back. And then the artwork by Carl Glover, who also did the Day and Age artwork. I was curious about the artwork too, because I know that you have this concept about the radio. Was that radio on the cover? Is that a model that you had previously owned when you were young, or where did that come from?
And actually, well, it wasn't fun enough. It was I found it on eBay in January for £15. But basically, I was looking. I've got two or three of them here. Funny enough, that radio's back here. But I wanted because the character sort of finds this his mission in life via an old beaten up old radio, like an old, long wave, short wave, world band radio. I thought I'll just go on eBay to kind of see what's out there, to get an idea. Because I kind of had an idea that it might be nice to have like a prop as a cover, something that wasn't a stock photograph, something that was ours. And I went on eBay, and it was funny. If I found one, I went, oh my God, that's absolutely perfect, and I bought it. And then I looked at it again and went, oh, maybe it's not right. And then I looked again, and then I found that one. I went, oh my God, that's absolutely perfect. That's it. So I bought that one as well. So in the end, I think I've got two of them that arrived. But yeah, it kind of has this. It's obviously had a life. It's really beaten up, this thing, and it's quite sort of quite big. It's just it kind of it's not grandiose. It's not showbiz and superhero. It's like there was a Disney film called The Black Hole, I think in the early
Oh yeah.
80s. And there were two robots. There was Vincent, who was cool and brilliant and brand new, and then there was Bob, which was knackered, and it's the same robot, but 20 years older, and it had all been beaten up, gnarly, and bits were hanging off it. And I kind of it seemed more human to me, or more real, that this kid would have something that wasn't pristine, and also the other thing is for it to get long wave and world band radios, it's going to have to be old because you can't really get that anymore. So it was lovely. And then when it arrived, I held it up and it was just like, there it is, and it's a lovely feeling when you've got the album cover. So I took it over to Carl and said, can you do anything with this? And he just photographed it, which was brilliant.
So available on two CDs. It's a two CD set. It's a two LP 180-gram gatefold LP, which is very prog. And it's going to be and
And
available
red.
digitally, of
Some of them are
course.
red.
Yeah. Um, why? Obviously, every prog band at some point wants to do the concept album. What was it about it that you found appealing in terms of? Was it just a nostalgia for the albums that you used to enjoy?
Partially that, yeah. I think it was. I mean, I've never been part of the vinyl revival, really. It's never. I've never been particularly captivated by it. But I did sort of want. I always wanted us to do a sort of double album. But it totally actually because of albums like Out of the Blue by ELO and The Lamb Lies Down. Because I do remember as a child sitting there and especially with Out of the Blue, it had that big spaceship on the front cover and you open it up and then it's the inside of the spaceship, which is also a recording studio. And I remember just I as a 7-year-old, I'd have the record on and just disappear into this album cover, for half an hour, 20 minutes, just trying to see every single thing that's going on. And it does have I suppose it does have a nostalgic effect on me, I think, but I didn't really realize it until the albums actually finally arrived when Inside Out delivered. I've got some sort of copies here. And to actually open up open up the gatefold of the album of the LP version really did make the hairs on my arms go up. It was kind of, and I wasn't expecting that, but it was very strangely connected to my childhood in a way. So I think, yeah, it kind of, when I was writing the album, I was very much of the mind that it's not two CDs or it's not an 86-minute stream. It was four sides of vinyl. That was absolutely how I envisaged it and how I wrote it. Actually, they were all written in kind of 20-minute, 21-minute chunks because I did a bit of research about what's the best optimum length for vinyl size for it to sound okay. Still you can't do like 28 minutes.
Yeah.
So they were sort of governed by how long one side of vinyl was, which was lovely actually. It was quite nice to do that. And I've done as Jeff Lynne and people would do and the Beatles would do. I mean, I've played a little bit with the fact that it's, if you have to physically turn it over. So there's some little audio things in there that kind of that are about, oh, you have to, even changing the CD over actually on the CD version, there's a kind of point where it's the end of disc one is different to the streaming version, which is different to the four vinyl side. So we had a lot of fun playing around with the formats and kind of making each one unique.
Yeah. And now your fans that are completists will go and get all of them. So which is nice for you.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. But then there's something for everyone. It's not just the
Yeah,
same thing three
sure.
times. So, yeah.
I'm glad you brought up ELO because I thought your cover of Here Is the News was brilliant. I really enjoyed. That's one of my favorite things you guys have released actually.
Thank you. No, that was brilliant fun. Again, I'm just a massive. Time it's just such a top five album for me.
That's great because I feel like that's an underrated ELO album
Yeah, oh
and
yeah, it's a
one of my
brilliant,
favorites.
brilliant songs.
So tell me about Livewire and this world that you've created that's sort of an AI run thing, and about your hero Nio or Neo. I'm not sure how that's pronounced.
Oh yeah, it's kind of it's well, it's again, it was a sort of hangover from day and age. We John and I had written these songs for that album, and I'd say the lyrics he'd written for some of the tracks. He has very lovely descriptive lyrics, and I can when I can kind of see the worlds that he sort of creates with some of the imagery that he uses. And in my head, for some reason, I just started to build this sort of world up, of this day and age world. And sort of in my head, all the songs on that album, although they're not connected or anything, it was almost like, to me, felt like it was all set in the same universe, the same place. And all these characters are just on that world, the sort of day and age world. I don't know why I thought that, but it's just in my head, it seemed like, it was a closed system, but all these things were happening on it. And again, I mean, I sort of had this idea because I'm a big fan of, or I used to be a big fan of Grand Theft Auto, the game. And as a kid, I you did, I think you're driving around, you beat some people up, you drive over here, you nick a car, and I loved all that. But what I liked was the fact that you could do whatever you want. You could think, right, I'm going to go on the bridge and go over to the other city, or I'm going to go over there. And it was that sense of you could do whatever you want, but everything, I kind of had that feeling that everything was happening at the same time, like in a real city, in a real continent. And so with Life in the Wires, I thought, what if the events that happen on this album take place on that day and age world still, that it's just happening over there, even though we're talking about terrestrial and, the characters in Skybridge. The Life of the Wires story is actually happening over there at the same time. So I had this idea at the end of the track Repeat to Fade, which is the final track on Day and Age, that it ends with this static coming up and this voice that just says, "Can you hear me?" very quickly before it cuts out. And I remember thinking, wouldn't it be brilliant if we could start the next album with the end of that one? Because it's like a continuation. So the new album does start with the end of Day and the end of Repeat to Fade, just with the static coming up, and then it goes into Sky Waving, which is the first track, which sets the scene up. And it was just this thing of thinking, that while all these characters on happening on Day and Age, there's this voice somewhere in the static that wants to be heard, and thinking, I'm not sure anyone's ever done, or I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but having a sort of, it's almost like a spin-off album, like Frasier was from Cheers. If Cheers is Day and Age, then Frasier is Life of the Wires.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it was quite an interesting, a fun thing to play around with, that maybe this is all part of a sort of ecosystem, and they're all going about at the same time having these adventures.
Sounds like you had great fun with the bits where Livewire's talking. This
Yeah.
I love the bit where he's we'll be taking calls, and then he's just kidding.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Well, the idea is, of course, that it's sort of slightly, it's sort of not post-apocalyptic, but basically, there are no listeners, there is no radio, because it's all digital now. There, this I had this image of this old DJ guy in a sort of, in a studio, and it's all a bit beaten up, and he's just laughing because it's all those things that we grew up with radio. We'll take calls, and who's there, what's the weather where you are, but no one's listening because they're all on Spotify.
Yeah. So I think for me, this album is the most Million Townish album you've done since Million Town. Now there are bits and pieces that sound like stuff that Frost has done throughout, but I feel like there was an emphasis on sort of returning to that Million Town sound to some extent. Was that the goal? And if it was, what brought you back to that?
It wasn't initially. It wasn't the goal. It was. We sort of had this unsung kind of rule that every album we do, when the next one is the sort of opposite of that previous album, and it kind of keeps us going. It's interesting to do that. And of course, one of the things as I was writing it, there were some bits where I was thinking, sounds a bit like, Million Town, or this sounds a bit like Hyperventilated. And I kind of thought, is that there's nothing wrong with that, because it's kind of, if it's who I am, and it's how I write as a musician in that default state. And so I thought, what would be the thing? And again, weirdly tangentially, what's the thing? We always try and do the thing that people least expect for the next album. And I thought, the thing people really wouldn't expect is if we went back and did something that sounded like something we've done before. So again, it did keep in the spirit of the sort of unspoken rule of doing something, flipping it in a way that no one's expecting. And I don't think anyone, least of all myself, was expecting that we'd end up kind of referencing that album. And I think once that started to happen, I started to think, well, why don't I reference, why not just reference them all, have a think about all the things I liked about what we did and why we did it, and be receptive to that kind of way of songwriting again. Because one of the downsides, of course, is about changing everything is there's going to come a point, which I think I've got to now, where I can't reinvent the wheel anymore as a musician. I am who I am, playing how I play, and I think it was nice to kind of go, well, okay, well, let's just accept that and celebrate that and be happy about it. So I think, yeah, what's been interesting is that the response so far has been extraordinary in a weirdly sort of, I wasn't expecting was the friendliness, because I think because of the nostalgia, I think it has put people, in a different place, and maybe put them back where they were when they heard the album, and myself as well, and it's actually, we did a video for Moral and Consequence, which came out I think a couple of weeks ago, which
Mhm.
is a compilation of all the old Frost reports and us, when we were doing Experiments of Mass Appeal and all that sort of era. And the amount of messages I got, including from the band, from John and Nath and Andy Edwards, who used to be in the band, all going, "Oh, do you remember those days? Oh, it's so nice to see that again. Oh, I got a bit emotional." And it's been interesting. This album does seem to be generating sort of quite an emotional response with people, which I think is lovely. It's really, what a lovely thing.
Yeah. Now it tells you that you've been around for a little while now. That you've put in some of
Yes,
the now
exactly
people can
right.
be nostalgia about Frost albums.
I know that's very strange. That's very strange.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's logical. I mean, you every album that comes out is a reaction to the previous album. So the way you invert that is to go back and revisit sounds and sequences from perhaps past albums. So that all makes sense. You talked about you're very I think known to be technical in terms of your production and in terms of how you interact with your audience. You've created this website live lifeinthewires.com
Oh
for
yes.
this album. What can you tell me about that? That's a very interesting concept.
Well, actually, the credit for that really has to go to it was the record company that sort of suggested a microsite, which
Hmm.
I hadn't really thought about, um, and and the idea maybe that the radio could be a central theme to that because obviously it's a brilliant sort of mechanism for loading it up with audio, and I thought I hadn't even thought that's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. So then I created a bunch of sort of audio for it, and actually we got Livewire back in to do some unique things just for that, that was really good fun because it kind of makes the character expands the character out even more, which is lovely, and we chucked a few little Easter eggs in there and just had some fun with it, and I had great fun sort of mixing all these old little bits of audio of us back together again. And actually, weirdly, another thing that a few people commented on was they were going, "Oh, I remember doing this as a kid. This is I really, and it weirdly had the same effect on me. It did make me feel a bit like those sort of days where there's all this mysterious noise coming out of the radio, and I think it helps to sort of amplify the vibe of the album. I think he did it in a brilliant way. I'm really, really pleased with how it turned out. But I say kudos to Inside Out. That was really their idea.
Well, I love the concept of the story. I really hope that at some point maybe this can be there can be a novelization of the story because I think it's very interesting. Um, you so double album, the the co-writes on this, according to the package I got, that John Mitchell co-wrote "Starting Fires" and "Strange World." Is that where this album began with those two tracks?
No, actually, weirdly, that was that we met them about 3 years ago. They were quite close post day and age. We got together at my house probably 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, and we wrote 5 songs over those 2 days. And I don't know, it was kind of they just seem to fit. I mean, again, John has the lyrics he sort of came up with for those 2 tracks um was kind of strangely applicable, and it was and also there's a lovely atmosphere to those two particularly, excuse me, Strange World, which had that kind of very wistful sort of feeling to it, very atmospheric, which was perfect for that moment in the story. It's a sort of moment where this character is reflecting on what a strange world it is, and it was just interesting that weirdly we wrote the song 2 3 years ago, and yet I read the lyrics and went, oh wow, that's basically what the character, and it was what the character's thinking, and it was great to include those 2 songs. Yeah, they were good. I mean, obviously I re-sang them, which John's furious about, of course. But there we are. It's my album. I'm gonna sing them.
There you go. "Life in the Wires" is your title track. I was curious as to whether that started as one song that you split into two parts, or if it was always meant to be two parts.
Well, actually, it's sort of it kind of weirdly it is a sort of song of 2 parts, but the second part is the third track, which hasn't been heard yet, which is called "This House of Winter." So it is a song of 2 parts. It's just that that's not that one. That's not the part that everyone thinks it of. But part two it made more sense for Life in the Wires part two to be obviously related to the part one because of the way the riff goes in it. There's a sort of reprise in the second half. But actually, there's also bits of the track "Solid State Orchestra" in part two. So the whole it's quite complicated as usual with prog, but basically it's weaving 3 or 4 songs together into that final kind of piece with little riffs and hooks from all of them. So it kind of it made sense to call it part two rather than you know the end or something.
Yeah. Um, was there a particular track that you found difficult to complete or difficult to find your way out of?
That's a good question. I that is a good question. Yes, I know because actually I've just been putting together a new Frost report, funnily enough, today about it. So I was because I did a lot of filming myself and was putting the album together. It was the end of the Solid State Orchestra. It was the end of side one, or the end of that first little suite of songs. I had it took me weeks to get that right. It was I've still got on the hard drive. I've still got like 9 versions of it, all with different bits. I just couldn't get it to work. It was very frustrating. So that took, and I was completing all the other songs and finishing off. But there was this really annoying hanging over bit that I couldn't finish, and it was that was really difficult. And I don't know why really, because I listen to it now and think, well, it sounds obvious. Of course, that's what you'd write. But I've got all these other versions. There's all these, and there's actually loads of brilliant bits that never made the album, which I'm really annoyed about because I was thinking this is going to be great. Wait till I hear this, and no one ever will, which is annoying.
Special edition anniversary issue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
There you
20 more years time.
go. Jem, what is next for Frost? What is next for you?
Well, obviously and we'll see how that's received, and and I think depending on how that goes, it largely informs what we do next. Really, I mean, it would be lovely to gig this, but obviously the finances, the cost of doing it at the moment, it's just I don't know how bands can tour like they, like some of our contemporaries, because I certainly can't afford it. I don't know, I don't know what they're doing to be able to afford it. But it'd be lovely to do it in a kind of, the album seems to want to be played in its entirety to me. It is our sort of Lamb Lies Down moment in a way, and it'd be nice to do the whole thing, you know, like Tommy, like to do the whole. It'd be great to do that, But to do that, we're going to need visuals, and we're going to need, it's going to have to be proper. We couldn't be four guys in a bar, Although we could do it that way, but I think the impact of the story might be a bit lessened. So I don't know. We'll see. I think this year, we're not be doing anything this year in terms of playing live, but next year we are talking about how we could do it. But it'd be lovely to get back over to the States. We want to go to Japan. We want to get back to Europe. There's all kinds of places we'd love to play. But I just can't quite work out a way of doing it at this particular point. But I live in hope.
All right, Jem Godfrey of Frost. I appreciate you telling me about this record. I'm very excited about it. I hope it does well for you. Obviously, when we're recording this, it hasn't dropped yet. You can find out more about Frost at the official website, frost.life. You can also follow Frost on social media, on Instagram and Twitter. The handle is at here be Frost, here HERE_BE_Frost. Check them out there. Jem, as a final question, when someone listens to this record, whether it's on vinyl, CD, or digital, they play it all the way through. They've given it a very attentive listen. What do you hope that they take away from that experience?
I hope that they feel reassured that humanity is going to be all right. I think it's, first and foremost, I want it to be entertaining. I don't want it to be like The Wall, where it's, great album, but I can't listen to that in a 1 hour without I can't do that one. I don't know. I think maybe, just maybe a little bit of nostalgia might be nice about when life wasn't quite so strange and complicated. And yeah, just a kind of a sense of, it's okay to not be on TikTok all the time, and that there are other life forms and lifestyles out there.
Absolutely. Jem Godfrey, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
I've had a great time. Thank you very much.